Good morning from Ubud, Bali. My name's Kabira, and I had one of my students write me a few days ago asking me how she can best connect to her ancestors. And one thing that I've learned in working with various healers and shamans and wise people in various traditions is that there's not one way. And part of connecting to our own healing, psychic, for lack of better words, spiritual powers is also harnessing our own creative sovereignty, is what I want to say. Meaning you're not so harnessed by the right way. And you first start with sitting with yourself and listening. And that could include, in the process of listening and settling down, just the initiation, the process you need to go through in settling yourself, in grounding. And in my experience, no matter how much we put into this, there will be days where it takes a little bit to ground, and we may need to get some of that excess energy out, some talking, some body movement, some breathing, and also a recognition that we have these wild minds that want to go all over the place like these untrained puppies and stegosauruses. And we just have to sit with ourselves and be conscious and aware of that part of ourselves that is always wanting to leave and distract and go into aversion and distraction. But once we can sit and feel the sensations, it's great to be able to discern between the thinking mind, which creates a certain frequency and vibration, and then the feeling space inside of ourselves. So any sensation that we have, to be able to harness into that. And once we've grounded and breathed and centered, and that could mean, as we meet the continual, possibly changing truth of ourselves, that could mean that you have some emotions that arise as well, and you meet that. But we are more interested in sensation and less interested in story. The sensation creates the truth. We are such interdimensional creatures that we don't want to delude ourselves and trap ourselves in such a small, myopic vision. So to know that we are comprised of so many lifetimes, so many dimensions. So we sit with ourselves. And as we breathe and calm down and center, we first give thanks. And you may want to make your own ceremony of thanks. Again, be creative with it. Spirits love good smells, clean spaces, bright flowers. But to give thanks of where you are and what you have. And then to speak, giving thanks to your ancestors. And starting to trust yourself, because it's a whole different part of your brain that needs to get turned on, which probably hasn't been used when you went to school. Most of our training as children and beyond, certain aspects of ourselves have been honed, refined, and celebrated. And we possibly are not as connected or even scared of using these other parts of our brain. And it's actually kind of simple. You just talk to your ancestors and you say, thank you. And speak to them in a sincere way of whatever that means for you. They may be certain ones you want to name. I know for myself, when I talk to my ancestors, ones that I'm not as cognizant of in my bloodlines. Those are the ones that come through. Sometimes they're not always in agreement with one another. But remembering the function of ancestors, along with being support for us, is remembering that we're here now cleaning up our bloodlines, that we've been given gifts, and we've also been given some stuff to clean up. So to take that responsibility of why we're here, and to know that they did their best, and now we're here doing our best. And so to listen to the messages that they have. And we could extrapolate that our ancestors are not just these physical planes, but we have ancestors in parallel universes. And so this is where I will extrapolate upon what I call the team. And all of us have, for lack of better words, invisible beings that are supporting us. And some will stay with us, and some, as we evolve and change, will leave and other ones come in. And I do know that when I was doing various practices, as any practice we have calls in a certain vibration, that you may not necessarily want everyone on your team. So to be really conscious of who you're calling in and who you're working with. This is why listening and paying attention to yourself and owning your sensitivity and not postponing your ability to tune in with yourself, because you are such a dynamic, magnificent, interdimensional being. The time to feel yourself and listen to yourself is now. And we all tune into ourselves differently. So just because one person may be more of a feeler, someone else may be more of a seer, someone else may be more clairaudient, how do we get these skills? Do not waste your time to postpone for next year when you can go on some workshop. And to be aware of, because I know more than anyone. You may not know this about me probably. You know, I was the most skeptical, doubting person. But the time is now to spend some time with yourself alone and to not wait for someone else to give you permission and to not wait for someone else to tell you what you should be seeing and feeling. Screw that. This is your time to tune into you and your personal power. And your sensitivity is going to get you there. So, when you're listening to your team, I know from me, when I first discovered mine, it was 2009. I was in Cambodia. I was managing a studio, teaching classes, giving sessions. It was a bit of a mess and chaos, and I was in pain. And I was looking for some other person to support me, and that wasn't there. And so, exasperated in desperation, I laid on my bed and I just said, okay, I know that I've got some invisible beings who are here helping me. And I'm not really sure who you are. I don't know how many of you exist. But please, if you're there, I really need your help right now. I kid you not. All of a sudden, I felt all of these hands on my body. And they started talking to me. And they started just clearing stuff out of my system. I, to this day, have never felt so amazing. After they worked on me, I just laid there. And I felt so cleared and aligned. And that's when I knew that it was important to really speak with them and to call them in whenever I did my work. Could we argue, since we are all one, am I just calling upon parts of myself? Hell yeah. There's 3 billion ways we can look at this. But whether we're talking about calling in our ancestors or calling in our team or manifesting our divine will, stepping into our truth, it all starts with ownership and naming it. We have to name it. Because anytime we don't name something, we're keeping it in the dark. And the moment we are willing to call something in, kind of like in the Bible, in the beginning was the Word. I can't tell you how many creation myths, talk about the power of naming it. And where most of us get cut off is our throat. We'll have all of this wisdom coming through, all of this inspiration, all of this passion, all of this desire. But when it comes to actually naming it, it's like we're scared. We can't be direct about it. So we have to name it. And I know that in the act of naming, because sometimes it's like, well, writing down is great. I write a lot by hand, not computer. But not talking in our head. There are times where I'll just sit down by myself, with some flowers, some incense, all my little special relics. Again, it's mine. Yours is going to look different. And I light a candle and I just start speaking. I start speaking to my team and ancestors. I speak to my highest self. I speak to God, however you want to name it. But I speak. And through the act of speaking, suddenly what really matters and what I really think and feel comes through. And suddenly it's like I'm clearing my own channel. And so these other parts of myself that I don't usually give space for come through. So this is what's important, is that we take the time to give space to what's important. And it's something you can't plan, meaning sometimes you don't know what you're giving space to until you hold that space. And as a side note, this goes for my yoga teachers. You know, you go through times of planning and planning, but you know the moment you step in and the moment you're willing to let God come through you, that's why you're teaching. It's not for some fancy sequence. It's not for some special thing that you've pre-planned. We are all here, no matter what format, we're waiting for grace. We want to be open to grace. And so making space for grace, this is the juice. And this is the creative essence that comes in. And yes, are we scared to be that spontaneous? Hell yeah. So it's meeting that part of us that's vulnerable. And allowing it to be there. And in that fluttering, shivering, scary edge, there's a great power of speaking from our hearts, of feeling ourselves be consumed by the greatness that we are. So I hope that you discover your own way to make space for grace. Talk to your ancestors, even if you feel a little crazy. You know what? All the great ones were a little crazy. Talk to your team. Let yourself break out so that those other parts of your brain, because we are such magnificent beings with so many untapped gifts, to make space for all these parts of you to come through. Have a great day. Namaste.